So we just talked very briefly about using a pad sound and what a chord progression typically would entail. But before we even get into all that, we got to decide, do we want to do something that sounds a bit brighter, a bit more happy? Are we trying to do something that sounds a bit more dark and moody? Because this is going to govern what sort of chords we want to incorporate into our song. Now, there's a ton of different scale types. There's a ton of exotic different scales that you can use, different chords you can pull from. But before you even start to explore all that, it's important to just have a basic foundation. And dealing with a basic major scale and a basic minor scale and figuring out what notes we can pull from those in order to create chords is a good place to start. So looking at this clip right here, if I was going to play something in a C major scale, a C major scale, looking at our piano roll over here, would just compromise me playing all of the white keys. If I turn on my preview button here, I'll just use my mouse and I'll click the keys, the white keys from C2 to C3. So very pleasant sound. We go from C3 back down to C2. Now, if I was to play a C minor scale, there's a few different types of minor scales that you can choose. But in this case, the most important thing really for our use is the third note in this scale. If we're going for a minor scale, we end up making this note one semitone lower. We flatten it. If we go with the first three notes of our major scale, it's C, D, and E. We go for the first three notes of our minor scale, it's C, D, and D sharp. Now, assuming maybe you're not the best with music theory, maybe you're just getting started, there's actually a few tools that are going to help us out when it comes to playing notes in a certain scale or in a certain key. Now, we're going to revisit some of these devices a little bit later, but it'll be really helpful to use a couple of them now as we're trying to think of some sort of chord progression or what key we want to play in. If we go to our MIDI effects here, we looked at the arpeggiator device before, so we know that MIDI effects take the incoming MIDI notes and process them before they actually hit the MIDI instrument. If we go to our device view, we can take one of these MIDI instruments, or MIDI effects, I should say, and we can place it before our instrument rack. And depending on which one that we use, it's going to take the incoming notes and do something different with them. And we can see the MIDI effect below the arpeggiator is the chord effect. So let's take this chord effect and drop it right before our pad device. We have 6 knobs here, and each knob says shift, and below that there's a certain number of semitones. So what we can do is play a note and then add more notes that are a certain number of semitones away from the root note that we're playing. So if I play C, right now the chord device is not adding any extra notes. If I add a note that is 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones higher, it sounds really nice. It sounds very, very pleasant. The result is we're playing C, which is the note that I'm actually holding. And if we go up 4 semitones, it's going to add the note E. As we said before, if that note E, that's the third note in the C major scale. And again, that major sound is very nice and it's very pleasant. Now, if I move this down 1 semitone so that I'm playing C and then adding something 3 semitones above it, that sounds a bit darker. And this is something that you can use to make the music sound a bit more moody, a bit more emotional. A lot of electronic music is made in a minor key. A lot of it's made in a major key as well. So it just depends on what sort of feel you're going for. And you can always weave between major and minor. The more you learn about chord progressions or just listen to popular songs, you'll hear that that's done quite a bit. Now, I've got one note that I'm holding, which is C. I'm generating a note that's 3 semitones above it. In this case, that's going to be D sharp. And again, a chord isn't just 2 notes, it's at least 3 notes or more. Now, when I was playing my little minor triad, let me go ahead and just deactivate our chord device, and we'll go back to our clip. The notes I was playing C, D sharp, and then I added the note G. The last note, if I skip the third note and I just play C and G, these two notes sound really, really nice together. They're known as consonant, which just means that when you play these two notes together, they complement each other very well. It doesn't sound like the frequencies are fighting. It doesn't make you feel uncomfortable necessarily. It's a very pleasing, very soothing sort of sound. Now, if I play my C and I play that G, the third note in the scale, the second note in my chord, is going to determine whether it sounds more happy and bright or major, or if it sounds more dark and emotional or minor. Adding E sounds very pleasant. This is our major triad. I go down one semitone, I add D sharp, sounds a little bit darker. Now, if you know how far apart these notes are from each other, you can basically play a major or minor triad starting with any note that you want. So let me go back to our chord device. And by looking at the numbers that we set up here to do either a major or minor triad, any note that you play, if you add another note that's 3 semitones higher, and then another note, which in our case, the distance between C and G is 7 semitones. So I'll go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the note that we're playing, and then we add another note that's 3 semitones higher. If we look at our clip again, a semitone is just the next note. So if we start at C, we go up 1 semitone to C sharp, another one to D, and then the third semitone from C is D sharp. So 3 semitones up, that's a minor third. Okay, that gives the chord its minor sound. If we start at C and then we go up to the note G, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 semitones. So if we go back to our chord device, we shifted that second knob to +7. This first knob is at +3. So this is a minor triad, no matter what note you play. If I take this first knob and I move it up 1 semitone, now I'm going to be playing the notes C, E, and G. So by shifting that second note in the chord up 1 semitone, we go from minor to major. So once you know this, you can basically get rid of this chord device. And as long as the notes that you're playing are that distance apart from each other, our first note, we go up 3 semitones. And then from there, we're going to go up another 4 semitones. You'll know how to make a major or minor triad without relying on this device. But this is a very nice device to have. And we're actually going to incorporate this in the next step. So I'm going to leave this here and turn it back on.